I love SwiftUI and iOS development right now. I think it's the best way for an independent developer to get their work into the hands of users. I've come to this conclusion while implementing the first few features of the app I designed in my last video. I've completed a few features, and at each stage I've become more impressed with Swift and SwiftUI. I'll show you those features and talk about what I really liked about the ecosystem. I decided to go with a tab layout for this app because I thought there was 2 or 3, maybe 4 different user flows that a user would be using within the app. So I thought a tab for each one of those made sense. I started with the home screen, which will be a list of goals and a list of activities, and the goals will link to a detail screen that we'll get into later. I'm not a designer, but SwiftUI, which was created by Apple, who is very good at design, has built-in user interface design. This is the same design that's used by many of the Apple apps like the settings, notes, the news app, and many others. I could spend several hours or even days on a design and still not come up with something that is as good as what Apple has given me. So why not use it? I've decided to go with core data to persist the data for this app. I was between this and a JSON file saved to the app documents, but I decided since this data was highly relative that it would be worth it to implement this within core data. As I discussed in the last video, this is going to have a person entity, a goal entity, and an activity entity. A person will have a list of goals, a goal will have a list of activities, and an activity will have a list of goals. These relationships will make more sense as I get further into the app development. Core data is an older framework, and because of that it does have some design patterns that don't quite meet up with SwiftUI's more modern approach. But even with those concessions, I think it more than makes up for it. The built-in interface for creating the entities and relationships makes it so easy to build your model. Then once you have that model, there's an API for all of your CRUD operations. So everything you want to do with that data is a really low code implementation. I don't have a ton of experience with alternatives, but I do have 2 apps on the App Store that were written in React Native, and persisting data in those applications was way more complicated. It uses a SQLite database that you have to initialize, create the tables for, and then write all of the queries that you're going to need. I strongly prefer core data to that. I just define the entity and then use the API to manipulate that data. There does get to be some ugliness with optionals and NS sets, but all in all, I'll take it because once I got that figured out, it was really pretty easy to use. I should mention that Swift Data is coming out in iOS 17, and it should actually get rid of a lot of that ugliness, but I didn't use Swift Data for this application. Now that I had the data type set up, I needed to give the user a way to create new data. I wanted to start with goals, but because of how the model is set up, I had to create a person first. So I threw a plus button up in the toolbar, a menu on it with a couple of options for create a person and create a goal. Then when those were clicked, I added a sheet for each one of those with a form to input the data and save. Nothing really more complicated than that. Finally, I added a detail view for the goals, set up as a navigation link from the home screen. The detail view just gives a little bit more information than what is available on the home view, along with a nice graphic to show how much of the goal has been achieved. I can't believe how easy it was to create what I think is a pretty cool progress view, along with some animation. A Z-stack, circle view, a text view, and an animation are all it took to build my progress view. Inside a Z-stack, I first placed a circle with an opaque border. Then on top of that circle, I drew a partial circle, which corresponds to the percentage of the goal that you've achieved. Then I just threw some text on top of that. Finally, I added a little bit of animation to give the screen a little bit of life for the user. This was all done using very high-level operations provided by SwiftUI. They were really simple to implement and gave a really cool effect, giving me a huge payoff for relatively low effort. I've added a decent amount of functionality to my ActivityTracker app over the last week, and I've gotten more comfortable with Swift and SwiftUI. A pretty successful week. I mentioned earlier that I believe app development is the best way for independent developers to get their work into hands of users. And I hope you can see from the features that I talked about why I believe that. To put it simply, I think creating apps specifically with SwiftUI allows you to forget about the non-distinguishing work that needs to be done to deliver software and focus on your app's functionality, which is what will set you apart as a developer. Thanks a lot for checking in with me. See you next time.